We want to introduce the aforementioned Mr. Michael Sussman, who's going to speak briefly.
It's good to be back in Yonkers, ladies and gentlemen. As many of you know, I spent 26 years here as a lawyer for the NAACP. The Attorney General of the state of New York has an awesome responsibility, and quite frankly, listening closely to what I just heard, I heard nothing about the discharge of the most awesome responsibility we have, which is to cure New York State of the duopoly of corruption, which is what is robbing New York State of integrity. We're talking about children and the message we're sending our children. Right now, we have had 40 prosecutions of elected officials in the last 15 years in New York State. Who is doing the prosecution? Is it the Attorney General of New York State? The answer is, in every case, it is not the Attorney General. We heard the last speaker talk about Donald Trump. And believe me, from long before Donald Trump was known publicly, I was fighting Donald Trump. I was suing his corporations for bias. But this is something to keep in mind. Mr. Mueller is still investigating Donald Trump. And the Mueller Commission, which was investigating Mr. Cuomo and corruption in New York State, was extinguished by Mr. Cuomo, the running mate of the last candidate. I was a Democrat for 45 years. I ran for county executive of my county. I've done some of the most significant civil rights and environmental cases of my generation. But I refused in 2017 to run as a Democrat in New York State for Attorney General for one good reason: the duopoly of corrupt practices. Sheldon Silver was one of the three men in the room. Joseph Percoco was Mr. Cuomo's top assistant. He is now about to start serving 6 years in federal penitentiary because of corruption that goes to the heart of the integrity of our governmental system. DJ Henry was shot to death in Pleasantville, in Mount Pleasant, 8 years ago. The DJ Henry family asked me to represent them, and very quickly thereafter I went to Albany. And I met with David Patterson, then the governor. And I said this to David Patterson: there is no way that district attorneys in New York State will or can responsibly prosecute police officers from their own jurisdiction. Why not? They have an institutional conflict. What's the conflict? They rely on those police officers every day to testify in trials. They need to have strong rapport with those police agencies. They can't turn around and indict those police officers. We need a special prosecutor. We finally got a system in New York where we have a special prosecutor running from the Attorney General's office for police homicide cases. The same exact analysis applies to the Attorney General of New York State. We cannot have someone running on the slate with Mr. Cuomo expected to vigorously prosecute Mr. Cuomo and political corruption in our state. It's an inherent conflict. And until and unless we recognize it frontally and say we need an independent Attorney General, someone like me who has 40 years of experience litigating in every court, Supreme Court of the United States, 400 arguments in the Court of Appeals in New York, 1,000 cases in federal court. Unless you have someone with that level of experience, don't talk to me about Donald Trump. You're dreaming. You have people who've never been in a federal court, never litigated in a federal court, talking about how they're taking on Donald Trump. It isn't going to happen. And it's a distraction to what we need in New York State. I don't want to depend on the Trump Justice Department to clean up political corruption in New York. I want an Attorney General in New York who's independent enough to clean up corruption. It's very simple. Now, it goes a lot further. You hear people talking about our environment. They crisscross the state and they found out there's pollution. I've been litigating major environmental cases for 20 years, and mostly I'm litigating against the DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation, because they will systematically not enforce the laws in our state. They are a major problem. They're a state agency. The Attorney General has to be strong enough and knowledgeable enough about environment to say to the DEC, you enforce the law or I'm going to publicly embarrass you, and I'll start enforcing the environmental laws. I'm angry because it's high time we got beyond these two political parties. People who know me from the Democratic Party write me, how come you're running? What right do you have to run? We're in America, ladies and gentlemen. We're in America. I have every right to run and put before you my ideas. And if you like them, vote. If you don't like them, vote for someone else. But Ms. James, Mr. Wolford, have no more entitlement to your vote than I do. It should be very clear. Should be very clear. Now let me go back to the health and safety of our state for one moment. We have a tremendous fracking infrastructure being built all over New York at the same time Mr. Cuomo, who in my view is a faker, and I've said it to his face and I'll say it to his face again. He presented a fracking moratorium in December of 2014. But in the last almost 4 years, we have had an unprecedented fracked natural gas infrastructure created in our state, importing huge amounts of dangerous fracked natural gas from Pennsylvania. You live in Yonkers, it may be distant from you, but you go to the Hudson Valley, you go through the state. It's taking farmlands, it's taking environmentally sensitive lands wherever they are in our state. I've not taken more than $180 from anyone in this campaign. My opponents are corporately financed. That is a significant difference. I will never take corporate money, and the reason I won't take corporate money is you owe people. And frankly, that goes for unions too. I have the endorsement of IATSE, the International Alliance of Stage Theatrical and Electrical Workers. They know me, they know my work. I didn't ask them for anything. Nothing. No one will own me. I've been independent. In the 26 years I litigated the Yonkers case, I had death threats galore come to my office. I had bombs sent to me. Everything in the world happened. I never backed down from the cause of racial justice in this city, and I fought for that all through the state. When 4,700 African American and Hispanics were faced with a test called the battery test, which prevented them from getting promotion. Other candidates, one was earning a lot of money at Aiken Gump, another was serving the city with distinction, and I credit her for that. They came to Michael Sussman, and they said, what is this test? I said, the test has no validity. It doesn't test for anything. The test has racial discriminatory impact. Guess what? I eventually got them $45 million, but it took me 6 years to get rid of that test. When I'm Attorney General, when somebody comes to my office and says, what is this test? I'm calling the Commissioner of Civil Service on the phone. And I'm saying, I'm an expert in testing. What in the world are you doing? Show me your validation study. And if there's no validation study, I'm not knee-jerk defending that agency in court. I'm telling the head of that agency, this case is settling tomorrow. Victims of this test are not going to be standing protracted for years. They're going to get a remedy tomorrow. There will be no knee-jerk defense of racism, of sexism. I understand one of my opponents was an assistant attorney general, or run a bureau in Brooklyn. Let me tell you, the attorney general, as it is currently constituted in New York, and I've brought hundreds of these cases, so I know from firsthand experience, knee-jerk defends racism and sexism in this state every single day. That will stop immediately. There will be a 45-day review for every single new case. And where that case is credible, there will be a settlement. You know what the Attorney General's policy is today? We don't settle. No settle. Federal court has mandatory mediation of every employment discrimination case. You know what the Attorney General's office does? They come to the mediations and they tell the judges, we don't settle. Whatever the merit of the case. Ladies and gentlemen, New Yorkers have a choice. It's a very clear choice. It's a choice between someone with 40 years, a Harvard-trained lawyer, that's me, at the top of my class at Harvard Law School. I went to the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. I then went to the National Office of the NAACP, where I ran litigation for 6 years all around America, dealing with voting rights. When I came to Yonkers in 1981, no African American had ever been elected to the city council. No African American has ever been elected to the county legislature. I had to bring the voting rights cases to get districts from which people like Andrea Stewart Cousins could be elected. That's the story. And people screamed and yelled at me. Let them scream and yell at me. I'll never be bought by any corporate interest, and I'll always represent what I believe to be the virtues of justice and civility. I am sick and tired of the New York Times saying, you're running on the Green Party, we don't have to interview you. They didn't endorse my opponent, either of my opponents. They endorsed Zephyr Teachout. And they said that we need an independent individual who is not already corrupted, who is not willing to be corrupted by corporate money, and who does not have any political ambition. In December, I'll be 65 years old. I've spent 40 years doing high-level cases, including cases in the Supreme Court of the United States. I am ready from day one to litigate, whether it's Donald Trump or whether it's Andrew Cuomo.
Yeah.
And guess what? It's going to be Andrew Cuomo. Because going like this to the Moreland Commission is insulting to every citizen in New York State. And that's exactly what he did. And I didn't hear my opponent say one thing about him, nor would I expect to. She's running on the same ticket. You can proclaim independence, but you can't be independent if that's your running mate. It's simply impossible. So I recommend to New Yorkers, take seriously the choices you have. I can preach too. But that's not the issue. The issue is who can litigate. And we've heard the litigation experience of the Public Advocate's Office. Frankly, most of the cases that they brought were thrown out of court because they didn't have standing to bring them. I agree with everything Ms. James said. Her analysis of the world, she and I could be, we're on the same page. I agree with her about every social issue. The NRA, immigration. You are electing an attorney general. You need to elect someone who has the strength shown by a long track record of successful litigation to litigate against those foes which every progressive has. So that's my statement to you. I welcome your consideration and support. I'm asking people to look at each candidate's record of accomplishment. We're appointing here or electing the highest ranking lawyer in the state, not the highest ranking politician. I'm not running for governor. You need to look at the lawyer's record. You need to understand what that lawyer has done as an attorney. That's what you're electing, an attorney general. As I said, I agree with almost every policy prescription Ms. James has, and her work as a public advocate is stellar. And I would not criticize or in any way denigrate that work. The issue is you're not electing a policy-related position. You're electing an attorney general. And that attorney general has to fight hard for campaign finance reform. Every year, Andrew Cuomo in his State of the State address says we're going to have campaign finance reform in New York. Where is it? It's nowhere. Where's the Democrat state Senate? Most of us in this room, where are our Democrats? Where is it? He and his father never wanted a Democratic state Senate. Everyone who's politically savvy in the state knows it. He'd be pushed too far to the left. What does that mean? It means we don't have single payer. It means we don't have the kind of progressive bail reform and criminal justice reform Ms. James talks about. That's who she's allied herself with. God bless her. I'm allying myself with the people. I'm going around the state, and I'm explaining to people what this job is and why I'm the best qualified person to do it. So I thank you for your attention. I thank you for your consideration. I thank you for the courage to look outside the box. And let me say one thing. If elected, it will be such a revolution in the state that a Green Party candidate would be elected. And I'm a lifelong Democrat. I spent 45 years as a Democrat. But if elected on the Green Party line for the reasons I've given, it would revolutionize the state in one fell swoop. It would send a message to every power broker and every corporate interest that they better watch out. Thank you very much.